This is an introduction to the book Death Comes for the Archbishop by Willa Cather. My name is Andy Rowell, and I want to give you some reading help on how to read this book and why. This book has a pretty good Goodreads score for a book written in 1927. It will take you about 8 hours to read. It's in the public domain, so there are cheap versions out there, $9, $6 versions. I chose one from 2024, which has an introduction. It's about $17, but it's okay also to do any version really. The Warden is another book that I often assign, and it's by Anthony Trollope, and it's similarly in the public domain, and so has a lot of different versions. And the only differences on some of these kind of books are maps and photos and introductions and notes and that sort of thing. In particular, this Richard um, Edulain version here, which is published by University of New Mexico Press. It has some notes, some historical notes in the footnotes there that you might benefit from, and so that's a good one. Also, there is an $80 scholarly edition by Nebraska Press with a historical essay by John Murphy, so you could look for that one as well if your library happens to have that one. It's really long. It's like 800 pages or something instead of a normal version, which is more around the 200-page length. Just as an alternative, I want students for my courses to read fresh books to them rather than have something be a reread. And so in that case, I would recommend, if you've already read Death Comes for the Archbishop, The Power and the Glory by Graham Greene from 1940, or Diary of a Country Priest by George Bernarnos from 1936, as they also depict Roman Catholic priests, and they're written kind of, within 15 years of when the Willa Cather book was written. Unlike Cather, they're both recommended by Eugene Peterson in his recommended books book, Take and Read. Okay, just something that I may make a mistake myself about, but the pronunciation of uh, Cather is like rather or gather. So if that helps you, it's still a little bit tricky for me to remember, but Cather is like rather or gather. The title of the book can be a bit uh, point you in the wrong direction. Sorry about that. If you thought it was a murder mystery, Death Comes for the Archbishop, it kind of sounds like that. It kind of sounds like Clue, what happened with the person in the drawing room with the pipe. It sort of sounds like that. Eugene Peterson recommends some books in his mysteries section that I've enjoyed. The Father Brown Mysteries by G.K. Chesterton, The Brother Cadfael Chronicles Mysteries by Ellis Peters. I've read all of those. The Name of the Rose by Umberto Eco. Those are murder mysteries often, and so that's an option for you along those lines. Glittering Images by Susan Howard from 1988 is again a barn burner of a book about scandal and pastors, and so that's one sometimes people think of as well. That's along those lines, that kind of exciting uh, kind of book that you might be thinking is happening with Death Comes for the Archbishop. But I guess I don't want to dissuade you or discourage you about Death Comes for the Archbishop. I think it's great, but it's not that kind of a book. I also thought of kind of movies that are along that line. Again, if you're looking for sensational, The Apostle, 1997, Doubt, 2008, Calvary, 2014, First Reformed, 2017, Wake Up Dead Man, Knives Out Mystery. 2025. Those can scratch that itch if you're really wanting to see uh, deaths of clergy or crime by clergy and that kind of thing. All right, some just again more things to kind of help you to read this book. Uh, there are a number of critiques. I really try in my course, Novel Reading for Pastors, to pick novels. So I actually don't do Flannery O'Connor, though she does have a couple novels that I could have required. So anyway, but I have decided to limit myself to novels, and now all of a sudden people say, well, this isn't even a novel. So I feel a little bit bad about that, but I don't. It is a novel. In some ways, it's definitely fiction. So all that to say, some have also said it doesn't have a plot, that he's barely an archbishop, that the book is arguably not so much about the archbishop, but about his friend too. And it's not really about his death. So let me just talk about those briefly. Some bullet points here. Novel. It is actually a series of scenes or episodes or short stories about the two priests. Cather calls it historical narrative or quote style of legend in the style of a legend with a sort of New Testament calm. Somebody else also I heard mentioned they thought it was sort of like the Gospels, sort of like the Book of Acts, something like that. I suppose, or even First and Second Samuel, those sort of Old Testament narratives as well. So anyway, um, that may help you to just have an idea of the kind of style. And some have said it doesn't have a plot. It does have a plot in the sense of it follows the lives of these two priests. Maybe it's more like biography to Archbishop. Latour does become Archbishop eventually, but he's bishop for most of the book. If that again helps you, orients you. Again, it's a bit of a spoiler, but I think it may just help you so you're less confused, about who you're supposed to be paying attention to. And it's Latour. He is the Archbishop. The Archbishop, the book is not just about him, but it's also about his co-worker and friend, another priest, Vaillant, Vaillant, Vaillant. So it's not just about death about the Archbishop and his friend, perhaps, would be another way of saying it. And death is not really about his death, it's about his life. So again, I think you can be thrown off by the title. The title is, I think, tantalizing. So I hate to let you down again about that, but I feel like that can be a little distracting. Again, I'm trying to help students who have been assigned this book to, get into it. And if they're kind of, distracted by the title the whole time and sort of confused, I don't really want them to have that experience if I can give them a little bit of a hint and tip here. Another tip here is telling the two fathers apart. Just a little bit about this. Bishop Latour, he's aristocratic. He's the boss. He can order Vaillant around. And then you have Father Vaillant on the other hand. He's a baker's son, and he's kind of out in the world, being a missionary, being an evangelist, whereas Bishop Latour is trying to have there be order to things. So Tower is his name. His again, I just sort of looked this up, but I think it's sort of useful for remembering the difference or remembering their names even a little bit. So he's going to build a cathedral, the Santa Fe Cathedral, and so Tower, fortress. That's sort of his background a little bit. I think that may help you in French. He's coming from French. Latour actually means La Tour Eiffel or whatever is the Eiffel Tower, so it means tower. There's also a really old Chateau Latour, which is a really famous fine French wine. And Thomas Jefferson mentioned it in 1787. So even before the 1850s, when this, or 1850s, 1880s, when this takes place, the story takes place. So basically, Willa Cather is giving this bishop a name, and it sort of means tower, wine, aristocratic. It, it's okay, I suppose, if you also think of Les Tours, like Les Tours de France, but like a bike race, a trip. But that's the prefix there. The article, the definite article is not lay, it's la, so it means tower. It does not mean trip. So anyway, he's a tower, and he's from this background. That's his, of kind of fine, expensive French wine that has a fortress over it, which protects the winery. So anyway, that's kind of an idea there. I don't know if there's even more about the significance of the sacraments, perhaps. I don't want to go too much into analyzing Willa Cather's names for these people. That's just something I'm doing. I'm just trying to actually do it to help you remember who they are. I feel like sometimes when I've heard discussion about this, people sort of are mixing up. Wait, is this Latour or is this Vaillant? And they almost get them mixed up a bit. And so I just think it's sort of useful to say, okay, Latour, that's who he is. And then Father Vaillant, and his name means valiant, courageous, and that fits with his character. So there's a little bit like Pilgrim's Progress, where their names have something to do with, what they're like. So in French, un vaillant chevalier, a valiant knight is a common term. So he is kind of a valiant knight, Father Vaillant. That's sort of his, but it's evangelist. That's sort of his way of doing things. And in fact, Latour kind of gives orders. He's in the tower, so to speak. He's building towers, and he's sending out, Vaillant, the valiant knight, out as a missionary. All right, I think that'll help you. I don't think that spoils too much. I think it'll just help you kind of follow what's going on. All right, this is actually based on real historical people, place, and times. You can read the novel, this fiction, without awareness of the setting. Cather describes it for you in a fantastic way. She was inspired by sights in New Mexico, the scenery. She got kind of interested in reading about the history from Santa Fe, and eventually she came across, the stories of and the letters about Vaillant, actually, kind of the person she bases things about Vaillant. And from there, she decided to create this story, this fictionalized story about these people. And she kind of did the research actually when people sort of possibly sort of remembered this. So, in the 1920s, and these folks had died in the 1880s. And so, 40 years after they had taken place, she was kind of doing some research on the real figures. So let's see here. That would be, somebody who died, 40 years ago. That would be, in in like 1985, 1986, something like that. That would be like somebody going back and researching that. Um, some people who died elderly people who died in the 1980s. So anyway, it's not inconceivable to actually talk to people who knew people like that. So people whose careers were in the 1960s and 1970s, that kind of thing. So like on yeah, I don't know. So anyway, I just thought of the fact that, but like Paul McCartney is still in the news, and his career was in the 1960s, right? And so just this idea that she could talk to people who knew people. And she did that. All right. She writes this. She says, since the book was a historical narrative, I took pleasure in making it as accurate as possible. While some of the incidents are fully, no wholly imaginary, they are in all they are all in the spirit of the two principal characters, I think, and a great many of the incidents are narrated pretty much as they occurred. I've received a number of letters from very old priests who worked under these two missionaries, and they generously insist that their memory of them is exactly identical with my conception of them. Myself, I very much doubt whether that can be true, but at any rate, it is pleasant to have these old missionaries feel so. So again, um, it's like again, if you read, I'll just go with this. Is that like, hey, I write a book about the Beatles, and I kind of change the names a bit of the Beatles, but I draw on their letters and I write something about John Lennon and that kind of thing. And then some people come up and say, boy, this really sounds like the Beatles, even though you named them something else. Those incidents, really happened like this. I remember they happened like that. And what she's saying is she's saying, well, I made them up. I based some of them on some true stories, but I made them up so they can't exactly fit with what you remember. All right. So just my comments here is that the upside is you're learning a lot about real events or realistic events. You can visit the places like the cathedral in Santa Fe. I've seen people who they travel through New Mexico, they live in New Mexico, and they just love then plan a trip through New Mexico to see some of this geography and history because they love what's featured here. And so, that's kind of cool that you can actually go and see the places that she's thinking of when she wrote this in 1927. And I think also the upside is this is, rather than sitting and reading a history book, this is beautiful and poignant, it's powerful writing. I suppose you could be distracted by the did this really happen kind of thing. So, sometimes after you watch one of those movies based on a true story, and then you go onto Wikipedia and you look up what really happened or the difference between what really happened and the movie version or something like that. But this is sort of the movie version, right? This is a fictionalized take that's hopefully beautiful, powerful, and meaningful about these two missionaries, these two Roman Catholic priests from France who grew up together and then became missionaries together in New Mexico. All right, a little bit about Willa Cather's uh, religious views. She grew up Baptist in Nebraska. Then she became a member of the Episcopal Church while she was living in New York City. So she herself wasn't Roman Catholic, but the Episcopal, I'm just going to kind of remind you if you're not as familiar with this kind of thing, that's the American version of Anglican, like the Church of England. That's what Episcopal is. And it also has, like the Roman Catholic Church, it has like traditional liturgy, beautiful church buildings, solemnity, candles, contemplation, robed priests, all those kind of things that are kind of high church, uh, you know, almost like Roman Catholic uh, church practice. And also, she did have more liberal views than the Roman Catholics in some respects, and she writes about that in some of her letters. She kind of I've read some people on this, and they pointed out that, does she support everything these kind of two heroes, these two great characters do? Maybe not everything. She's kind of withholding judgment on some of that. Shakespeare also is like this, where Shakespeare doesn't tell you exactly what to think, but there's also implied that, in general, I think she's generally supportive of what they do, or she finds beautiful what they do, but that doesn't mean she's endorsing everything about that. Again, this is fiction. The point is sort of to experience this rather than kind of it's not one of those books which is just like trying to overly depict the saints as perfect, that kind of thing. All right. um, all right. So why read this? Why do I encourage people to read it? I think it's great. It's about missions, it's about leadership, it's about pastoral integrity, it's about perseverance, it's about friendship with coworkers in ministry. These two, Father Vaillant and Bishop Latour. So kind of like a David and Jonathan friendship, or Paul and Priscilla and Aquila, and Romans 15, where they have this really great depiction of all these friends in ministry, that kind of thing. Romans 16, Romans 15. So, understanding what to do in unusual situations and with unusual people, I just think that's really something that happens. We learn vicariously. We don't have to go and be a missionary in New Mexico. Instead, we experience it through the eyes of Father Vaillant and Bishop Latour, and it's a learning experience for us, right? What would we do? How would we handle these situations? Because we may face in in today's situation similar situations. So that's kind of the experience of this. Again, it's not explicitly trying to teach you about that, but I'm just trying to say that's the effect, I think, for pastors, chaplains, is that you will learn alongside them. You can kind of watch alongside them and see how they handle things. All right, and also the beauty of the writing, that's subjective on my from me. I think it's beautiful, but you may be bored. I suppose. I think you'll be moved. I think you'll be helped and enjoy it. I think along these lines, there's awareness of geographical features. It'll help you think about canyons and deserts and thirst and hunger and being lost and the wind and the heat and caves and storms, and just thinking about those sort of features that are part of life, and how do those affect kind of how we feel emotionally and people, and how do we think about God with regard to the creator God, and yet these kind of really bleak settings as well. So that's part of the beauty of this. It teaches us to notice things. That's one of the other advantages of reading this. Again, I think it'll just transport you to a new place. I don't know if any of you live in New Mexico, but it'll transport you there. Also, I think it's useful to learn about a Roman Catholic approach to pastoring. They emphasize the sacraments. They're in a hurry to make sure that infants are baptized. That people have taken the sacrament and gone to confession. That's like really important to them. That's for a Protestant, that's almost not the first thing that when you show up, maybe you're teaching the Bible or something like that. You're not as, hey, we've really got to get these, infants baptized, and that kind of thing. And we've really got to get the sacrament. Got people to participate in that, so that they're clean. So if death should come, they're ready. That kind of urgency is part of the kind of Roman Catholic mentality that I think is useful to think about and to watch. They're also interested in practices and buildings, building buildings, that sort of thing, kind of establishing order, that kind of thing. Again, why read this? Again, you're getting in the mind of a woman, a female writer in New York City in 1927, who is very interested in what happened 40 or 50 years before her in the 19th century New Mexico. And so there's a learning that happens there, where you're hanging around with somebody different than yourself, different than the internet. That's kind of just good for us, maybe, and a challenge and something fresh. All right. I think this is great. It's worth showing you here on this video, this slide here, where that kind of inspired the opening scene of the book. And this is what Willa Cather says. She says, "It was a painting, by the way, that made the first scene of that story for me. A French painter Vibert, and this is it from the Metropolitan Museum, once did a precise piece of work in the manner of his day, and this painting's called The Missionary's Return. It showed a gorgeously furnished room with cardinals in scarlet sitting at ease with their wine and speaking to them and telling of the hardships and glories of missionary work in some far part of the world. A pioneer priest, his garments dull and worn, but his face all alight. So basically here you see, they're in red, they're lounging, they're in pink and red, and then you see this person, in black leaning forward, and I think that's meant to show that's dull and worn, and kind of urgently leaning forward and telling them about what's going on, what they've seen as a missionary. And so, again, there's just this contrast between kind of the elite hierarchy, who are kind of living in comfort, drinking wine, I don't know, eating sumptuous food, and then the missionary there who doesn't care about their clothing, doesn't care about eating, just wants to tell them what God's up to in the kind of frontier of the world. So a little bit of that Acts 15 scene, right, where the um, people come who have seen Gentiles become Christians, and they meet with the pillars at Jerusalem and tell them about what's going on. But that's a much better scene in Acts 15 than this scene, which kind of depicts the hierarchy, the as kind of rich and out of touch and living in comfort. All right. This is a signed reading. I say sorry because Willa Cather says she doesn't want this book to be a signed reading. But this quote, let me read to you and then I'll explain it. She says, "I hope the readers of this story, Death Comes for the Archbishop, have enjoyed reading it as much as I enjoyed writing it. I like my stories to be read because people like them. I didn't want it be assigned reading for university classes, a duty, a target for information vampires. Why should anyone try to teach contemporary literature anyway? Stories are to be read. Sincerity, again, she says, they talked about that earlier in the interview. The sincerity of feeling that is possible between a writer and a reader is one of the finest things I know." And so just to say that she's trying for this to be enjoyable. She's not playing like innovative, postmodern, I don't know, whatever you call it, games, yanking the rug out from under you as a gotcha. Even at that time, they were doing that kind of stuff of like, this is what readers will expect, so we will do the opposite. She's really trying to tell a story and have you enjoy it. She's not really, trying to do really innovative, kind of edgy stuff in this book. So enjoy it. I mean, some people have found this relaxing. I don't know if I found it relaxing, but I did find myself transported to it and found some parts beautiful and touching and memorable. And the whole effect of the novel, yeah, just uh, left me kind of appreciating the integrity of these missionaries. All right, and that's how I'll end here. One of the things she says, she wrote actually to Commonweal, the Catholic uh, uh, newspaper or magazine at the time, when she published this book, kind of explaining a little bit where she was coming from, kind of as somebody who's not a Catholic. She wrote it to the Catholic magazine, kind of to explain herself and to try to say, I'm not trying to undermine you or anything like that. This is a book, and I hope you enjoy it as well. And I kind of mean well with it. And it's in some of the editions of the Death Comes for the Archbishop. It's not in this one, unfortunately. So anyway, but one of the quotes I liked from that is she says, "The martyrdom of the saints are no more dwelled upon in some of the books she appreciates. The martyrdom of the saints are no more dwelled upon than are the trivial incidents of their lives. It is It is as though all human experiences measured against one supreme spiritual experience were of about the same importance. And I summarize this with all of life lived faithfully. And so I think maybe that is for me the appeal of the book, is that there's just a ton of little incidents depicting these two priests as missionaries in kind of difficult circumstances. And they're little case studies, they're little depictions of what it might mean to live with integrity, to pastor well, to shepherd. Uh, Maybe, I don't know that I agree with every single thing they do, or say, but I still think it's stimulating. I think that's kind of the overall effect, is that, it's not so much the exact moment of death, but every moment of your life. And that's what she's sort of saying, that actually, the martyrdom of a Christian is daily carrying your cross, that sort of thing. It's not, just the moment of death and how you handle that. So I think that's sort of the meaning too of Death Comes for the Archbishop, is that it's a daily kind of thing. So I hope you'll enjoy this book. I hope that I gave you some good reasons and some good guidance here on how to read it. Enjoy reading Death Comes for the Archbishop.